Hi, everyone. My name is Nimadi Belu, and I am the Diversity and Equity Fellow with NAMI, Delaware. I'm so excited to have a great guest with me today. I have Miss Chandra Pitts, and she is the CEO of One Village, and she's joining me for our monthly mental health conversations. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Do you want to tell everybody just a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so again, my name is Chandra Pitts. I'm the president and CEO of a global social justice organization called One Village Alliance. We're based right here in Wilmington, Delaware, but have a reach statewide throughout the Delaware Valley. And we have 240 schools in West Africa. So I'm really excited about the work that I've been able to lead and the team and the community that we've been able to work with over the last 13 years.
Yes, and you do such great work in the community. That's why I wanted to talk to you, especially this month. It's Black History Month, and it's a topic that I know you're passionate about. I see your post about it. You are very strong in being an advocate, a voice for the Black community. Why do you think that that's so important?
The community really needs a voice because often we come from a historically marginalized community in the areas where sometimes our voice is taken away or minimized or criminalized, dehumanized. So it takes people taking a stand and just speaking truth to light for underrepresented, again, historically marginalized communities.
Absolutely. And part of what you do, something that you've done recently, which I really enjoy, is you always have a program with the boys, your Kings, your the Raising Kings program,
Yes, raising.
which I think is amazing overall because our men and our boys need our support. But especially as we think about the area of mental health and mental illness, they don't often feel like they have the safe space, right, to be vulnerable. And I think that your organization and the things that you do helps to give them that. So how do you use your organization to give boys just a space to feel like they can talk about the things that are going on in their lives, especially as you connect them with older men as well who have been down that road?
So, our goal with Raising Kings is to change the prominent image expectations and outcomes for Black men and boys. So, thank you for that question because it is important to show our boys who they really are, connect them with the real potential of, men of color who are doing really well, physically, mentally, spiritually, career wise, financially. Um, a lot of times, there's so many stressors and so much trauma that we face that almost becomes normalized
Mm,
in the Black community, particularly when we're dealing with every single message of Black men and boys, every single negative statistic. Black males are often verbalized and depicted at the top of those lists. Incarceration, mental health, um, arrests, fatherlessness, broken families, broken homes. So when we're hearing these messages all the times regurgitated, you know, that, Black men and boys, Black males will end up one of two places by the time they're 25. And when people can finish that sentence, and it's not really based in any statistic or any data, but we're just speaking a destiny over an entire population of American children. Um, we really have to take a look at ourselves as a society and be really intentional about impressing upon our young Black men and boys and our girls. We have a program called Girls Can Do Anything as well, so it's all inclusive. And even with the work that we're doing with boys, it's very holistic and inclusive of the whole family and community. So not only are we engaging boys, school age and up, but young men, college students, peer mentors, older, middle age and elder men, so across the spectrum of Black males, but also mothers raising sons, grandmothers, aunties, the women in the lives of those boys. So we have a whole track for women who are raising sons, because then there's also these messages that say mothers can't raise sons. And it doesn't matter if you're being raised by a single mother, or you're married or you're from a whole village and a large family, mothers are raising our children. Mothers are raising sons and doing it very well. But just like the boys and the men, our mothers need supports as well. So we're addressing kind of all of those things and, elevating the level of positive male engagement in the lives of boys, and also teaching family members, be it mothers or fathers or young men, how to build your village, because it often takes more than one parent or even two to really build an inclusive, supportive village that it takes to really grow into a healthy child and a healthy young man.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that I love about One Village is that you really do personify that village message, right? Like it's you do the program
Mhm.
with the boys, you do the program with the girls, you do the program with the parents because it's all encompassing and each part sort of helps the other. And as you help heal one group, it helps the other one flourish. Um, you know,
Definitely.
when we talk about mental health, some things that I think people don't often realize is that so much of our environment plays such a huge role in our mental health, and especially when we talk about um, lower income areas as well, because they tend to have an area of higher violence. And
Yeah.
there's actually been studies that have shown that people who live in like the inner city have PTSD almost on the same level as people who go to war. Not the
Mhm.
same level, but they have the same type of PTSD because of the trauma of what they're facing and what they're seeing around that. Have you seen some of that with the boys or the girls that you work with? And if so, like how have you with your programs helped them?
So when people, yes, to answer your question, yes. When people talk about PTSD, that P stands for post, the T is for trauma. When people go to war and then they come back to their safe space, that's one thing. What our children and families are dealing with is not so much PTSD, but it's persistent trauma that's happening every day. They're growing up in a war zone. They're growing up in extreme poverty.
Hmm.
Um, in many cases, they're growing up, still being marginalized, not being able to get adequate resources. And I'm not even talking about those in extreme poverty, people in color in general who are still, we still have discriminatory lending practices, young people trying to start businesses, young leaders working in the philanthropic community here in Delaware and well beyond. Um, we're facing that persistent, those negative images, um, the constant doors being closed, the constantly having to fight for every single thing that we need. From we've often heard about the data supported school to prison pipeline. We're cognizant of what our Black young men and boys and girls are facing in schools and what those climates look like and how that is steering our children down a path to prison. And now that research has expanded with the birth to prison pipeline. So just to hear things like that really puts you in a state of mental illness. So the focus on mental wellness has to talk about all the other pipelines, because just like those two places Black men are going to end up by the time they're 25 that are really negative, that school to prison pipeline, the school to birth, we're hearing these messages of just inadequacies, deficiencies, failure, and death constantly. So as a mother, myself, having raised a son, which was the catalyst for me even starting Raising Kings, because I needed the supports. I wanted to open up my mentor circle. I wanted to teach people how I built the village to grow a successful child, but also to address the trauma of being a mother raising a son. The things I worry about as a woman of color, Black woman. I'm a first generation Mexican American. I'm an African American woman, but raising a young, beautiful human being who society, and particularly white America, sees as two words, a Black male. It's a very traumatic state of mind to send him out into the world every day. Who is he going to encounter? How are educators speaking to him? What does that school climate look like? What is the reading and the literary material? Um, whose stories are being exposed? There's this conversation in school right now, from scholars to elementary school, around, should we teach our children the truth about their history and who we are, white American and black American children? Why are we having that dialogue? Because people don't want white children and white people to feel bad about history, but it's okay to continue to just teach a very small negative part of history, American history, to black children. And again, it's those constant messages of abuse, brutality, abuse, and death. So it's very important to take a real asset-based approach, a human approach, tap into the humanity of who we are as black children and families, our girls, our boys, our mothers, and our fathers, and expose them to the 2 million places they can end up by the time they're 25. All of the career paths outside of just being a rapper or a professional athlete. There's 2 million plus different career paths. So when we bring in those, hundreds of men and mentors who are our Raising Kings ambassadors, it really exposes young black boys to greatness that they may have never heard about and definitely haven't seen, um, prominently represented in their surroundings and their communities.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And representation is so important because, you can have a vision or dream, but sometimes if you don't see that, it's hard to really
Mhm.
like place yourself there.
Yeah.
I also love that you mentioned the schooling right now. It's Black History Month, so if there's ever a time to talk about the education, um, it is now because I've been through school and I went through, I think, a grade school program. I thought I knew a lot, and then I graduated and realized how much Black history is not taught in our schools. And now
Mhm.
they're trying to pull away even more of it, which is truly, I feel like, just a disservice to everybody because you should know the history. But, and I understand on some level, the human level of saying, like, oh, I don't want, our kids to feel bad, but that's how you learn from the past. And I feel that if Black children and brown children have to live it, right? Because we know statistically that people encounter issues with their race at a very young age where they're judged with it or they face racial issues, then if they can live it, then their peers can learn about it because that's the only way we will improve things as we go forward. So with your program and like with your mentorship and even just you in general, how do you help help them have that sense of Black pride and Black joy? I feel like that is so needed and so needs to be poured into us. And I think that you do a great job of them, even just calling them kings. Like it seems like a little thing,
Mhm.
but it's a big thing. And that goes back to helping how they feel mentally and how they carry on through life. So like what are some ways or how does your program um, help to really enlist that within them?
Again, exposure and representation. You know, this whole idea of critical race theory in schools, it's not a theory, it's historic fact. And we start right there. We tell our children the truth about the humanity and the inhumanity that we've survived through in spite of everything. Black people have survived in this nation. And there's a lot to be said for that, but there's many historic, facts that we have to bring out, because you can't change the sum of a problem without changing the factors. So we can't start below the line, like, okay, here's the problem, how do we change the problem? You got to look at the factors above the line. If you're looking at a math problem, those factors, and then that's the sum of those factors when you add those factors together. So we have to learn about things like, red summer and redlining, two very, very different things. But that red speaks to the bloodshed in our communities and the things that we've survived through, and how Black people have thrived. there's so much more than just slavery in our history. You know, our ethnic roots, how we've built this nation. The truth is, there is no theory and nothing more critical when it comes to American history than the contributions of humans with black and brown skin, indigenous people to this land. Um, so we start right there with the truth. We start with representation. We start with research and data, telling our story, making sure that we're dealing with the truth and the implications of the lies that have been told. So, and then we go into really addressing the social determinants of health. So not only are we doing direct programming with children, for children and families, but we're focusing on family strengthening and also public policy advocacy from an education, organizing, and mobilizing. So when something's coming up, our school board meetings are critically important. What's happening in classrooms, what's happening at Legislative Hall, what's happening right here in the city of Wilmington and in cities, you know, throughout the Delaware Valley, and empowering children and families to let their voice be heard. You know, when people ask, what does the Black community need? Um, the same thing any human needs. We need lighting. You know, when we're addressing the trauma of violence in our communities, lighting, a community safety plan with the same community policing that we see down at the riverfront and on Market Street Mall. We need to see that presence on Hilltop in the west side and on the east side, in those neighborhoods that have high incidence of violence. Because again, our children are living in trauma. And it's one thing to experience death and killing in a foreign land at war, and then to come back and you're in a safe community. But again, when you're experiencing death and killing consistently in your own community, and then you don't have an outlet. So we want to be able to talk about those things and address the trauma and the sadness, not just of the things happening on our own blocks, but the trauma and sadness and mental illness and the mental crisis that we're in from all the things we see on social media, from the Tyree Nichols and the George Floyds and the Breonna Taylors. We carry so much as a Black community. And it's not just having conversations and talking about that, it's changing policy and holding people accountable so that we can get to a point of PTSD. That would be growth for the Black community because that would mean we're post. But today, the trauma persists day in and day out because we won't address policy head on. We want to have conversations about racial equity and justice because they're popular, they sound good, these conversations. But when you look at the state of Delaware and the policies and practices with regard to mass incarceration, mass is an abbreviation that stands for massive. The data says that we have a massive incarceration issue. So, what are the things we're having conversations about? And what is Delaware really committed to? Because to have conversations about equity, justice, and you know, racial equity and the Black community being safe and thriving and well supported, and then to demonstrate by policies that we're committed to injustice and equity, we have a real problem, not as a Black community, but as a state of Delaware and as a human family.
No, absolutely. And I appreciate the work that you guys are doing to acknowledge that and address it and make any changes because we need all, right? Back to that word, that village. It takes everyone putting their hands in. But of course within the Black community, it's not just our joys and or it's not just our struggles and our sadness. There's joys too, and we have a lot of really great things and really great people in the community. And something I think of when I think of joys is your Girls Can Do Anything
Yeah.
conference. Like it's such a wonderful program. I went to it a couple of years ago, and just seeing the girls there, seeing how happy they are, seeing people come in from the community doing the different workshops with them, I think it really speaks to, as you said with the boys as well, letting them know that there's other possibilities, but then
Yeah.
let them also know that there's different there's different representation for them out there. There's
Mhm.
different people that they can speak to, because we, with women as well, hold a lot in, and we
Yeah,
also need to have that outlet also.
absolutely. Yeah, we do create those safe spaces for us to share our struggles and, to talk through issues and challenges and understand that there's a broader community sharing those problems and challenges. Our girls are dealing with so much. If you see the research and data on girls, the CDC just, there's two things that I think have been overlooked. One of the things when the CDC, which is why everybody started wearing masks and standing 6 feet apart and shut down and stopped coming out of their homes, the response was very serious when the CDC said that COVID-19 was a pandemic. But later, that following year in 2021, the same health organization announced another major crisis directly impacting the health of all Americans, an epidemic. Um, and that epidemic was declared by the CDC as racism in America.
Mhm.
Where were the masks for that? Where was the mass community response? Where was the cover and the protection and the vaccination for racism? What was the solution to that issue? But it just was brushed under the rug, and nobody really paid attention to this unprecedented historic finding of the CDC declaring racism as a national epidemic.
Mhm.
So that happened in 2021. And then earlier this year, late last year, the CDC again announced this mental health crisis, particularly affecting Black girls at a higher level than anyone. Um, so we have to have a mass outcry and response to these things when it's not just funding big pharma, right? When it's really about the health, wellness, and overall well being of American children, of human children. Because we also got to, the word Black is used to almost dehumanize. Um, at best criminalize. When we see a death, brutal death or something occurring in a community, we need to just say, hey, these children are suffering. Why are we saying that they're Black children? These are human children. These are Delaware's children. Because we need everybody taking a stand. And for some reason, when you put the word Black in there, people think that, oh, that's a Black community issue. It's not. It's a Delaware issue. It's a human issue. And it requires a mass human response. And that response is, you know, um, people like those who convened during Raising Kings, and people like the amazing women who gather in a movement to prove that girls can do anything. So we're inspiring not just by motivational speaking and keynotes and stories and events, but we're really making real life connections that expand well outside of any event or program to real leaders and people and survivors and business owners and philanthropists right in our children's own communities so they
Mhm.
can connect with people other than the professional athletes and music artists that they see. But we're raising the platform and creating a stage for those modern day heroes, those history makers today, because it's really not about um, Black history. It's definitely not about a month, because this is 365. None of us exist any day of any year without amazing human beings from Black and Brown communities who are making the world, building an amazing world for all of humanity. So we're raising a platform for those leaders and for kids to really in real life touch people who are traveling the world and making an impact in their own small community, making a difference in the global community, starting businesses. So the exposure is just the very beginning. Then we're giving them the lessons and the workshops. So, for example, the keynote speaker for our Raising Kings conference was Armani Coleman, And he is a young, grew up right in the north side in North Wilmington here, went to Warner Elementary School, but also had great opportunities to go to Sanford and University of Delaware. He's now a full-time day trader. He's teaching. So yes, he was the keynote speaker, but he's also right here at One Village Alliance every single day. And we're going to be launching classes on how to build wealth, how to invest, how to start a business. He's owned multiple businesses that he still owns, and he's thriving in his early 20s as a young person. So being able to tap into really strong leaders, but also their own personal greatness,
Mhm.
and learn the steps on how to get there themselves.
Yeah, and I think that that's so helpful for them because sometimes you see the end and you're just like, well, how do I get there? I have no clue where to even
Yeah,
start. And then it feels overwhelming. So having a space or having, something that you can have as a guide, I
yeah.
think makes a huge difference.
One of the very first questions that came out of the very first Girls Can Do Anything is pouring rain, 7 a.m. 350 girls were lined up thanks to Senator Margaret Rose Henry, who opened Dell Tech during that first year. I think it was 2012. And I was a little 8-year-old girl who stood up on a chair because she was so small. And her first question to the panel was, how do you find your dream?
Mhm.
There's all these talk about, realizing your dreams and making your dreams come true and dreaming bigger. But how to find your dream is very, very important. So we're working, we have take a very decentralized approach. We're working in schools, libraries, low income housing communities. We partner with faith based organizations like UAME right here in North Wilmington, but also in every institute where youth are incarcerated. We're at fairs, we're in the cottages, speaking with girls and boys incarcerated there, um, how to give them the skills to tap into how to find their dream, how to navigate the real life trauma that persists every single day in their lives, the extreme poverty, the miseducation and undereducation, and lack of culturally competent leaders and trainers and support system, and maybe broken families, and how to build your village. Define who you are, tap into your own knowledge of self, not these negative messages that, cultivate mental illness in our communities, but really positive, empowering, inspiring messages of greatness to raise the next generation of Dr. King like leaders, and the next Black history makers of today. So that's where our
Yes.
work is.
Absolutely. Again, I love everything that you do. Thank you for taking the time to talk to me today and just share a little bit more about that. I think oftentimes when people hear mental health, they instantly think of mental illness, and especially in our community, in the Black community, sometimes it's hard to have those conversations. But something that people need to remember is just like everybody has a physical health, everybody has a mental health, and you don't wait until you're sick to take care of yourself. And so you shouldn't wait until you have a mental episode or an issue to take care of your mental health. And part of that is finding, ways of people like you and your organization that pour into kids even from a young age to help them have sound, healthy, happy mental health despite everything else that's going around. So your work is so needed and very important. And I can't thank you enough.
Thank you so much. I just want to say it's going to take the whole Delaware community to really produce positive outcomes with regard to the mental health of the Black community. There's some real change that needs to be made here, and it truly does take a whole village to raise a healthy child, strong family, and thriving community. And we can only thrive together if we're committed to working together. So thank you so much for the work that you're doing, and thank you to NAMI.
Thank you.